Ambassador Zilvek shifted uncomfortably in his environmental suit as he observed the human delegation across the polished quantum marble table. The Grand Galactic Council chamber, suspended in orbit around the neutral planet Harmonium, buzzed with the quiet murmurs of 17 different species representatives. The humans only recently admitted to the council after developing faster-than-light travel sat with perfect posture, their expressions placid, their hands folded neatly on the table. Ambassador Helena Mendoza, the lead human diplomat, smiled warmly at Zilvex when she caught his compound eyes studying her. That smile. It still unsettled him after 3 cycles of diplomatic relations. The Corvassians, like most sentient species in the galaxy, did not bare their teeth unless they were about to attack. Yet humans did it constantly, insisting it was a gesture of friendliness. Zilvex had been briefed extensively on human customs before his assignment, but intellectual understanding did nothing to suppress his instinctual reaction. Shall we proceed with today's agenda? High Chancellor Omni Zur's melodic voice resonated through the chamber. The amorphous luminescent being floated at the head of the table. The Council will now hear proposals regarding the Fringe World crisis. The Fringe Worlds, a cluster of resource-rich planets on the outer rim of Council space, had been suffering escalating attacks from the Drazar Collective, a notorious group of interstellar raiders who had thus far resisted all diplomatic overtures and military deterrence. 12 colonies had been destroyed, millions of lives lost. The Council had been debating intervention strategies for nearly a full rotation, with no consensus in sight. The Corvassian Dominion proposes a defensive perimeter, Zilvex announced, activating the holographic display at the center of the table. 300 automated defense platforms at strategic coordinates. With contributions from all Council members, we could establish this shield within 30 cycles. Ambassador Ji Tal of the Ruktarian Hive fluttered her energy wings dismissively. Such defenses would merely delay the inevitable. The Drexar would adapt, they always do. The harmonious confluence suggests negotiation, came the synchronized voice of the 3-bodied Ambassador Trin Lu Sa, perhaps offering trade routes. They slaughtered the last negotiation team, interrupted Ambassador Creel of the Vortigern technocracy, his metallic appendages clicking against the table in agitation. Negotiation is a proven failure. Helena Mendoza had remained silent, her fingers lightly tapping against a datapad. Zyvex noticed that the 2 junior human diplomats flanking her, a male named Daniels and a female named Rodriguez, were similarly quiet, their eyes constantly moving between the various ambassadors. Perhaps, Mendoza finally spoke, her voice surprisingly soft yet somehow cutting through the growing argument, the Council would consider a human solution. The chamber fell silent. Humans were newcomers, their technologies generally considered crude compared to the ancient species that dominated the Council. Yet there was something about their rapid advancement that both intrigued and disquieted many Council members. The Council recognizes Ambassador Mendoza, High Chancellor Omnizur acknowledged. Mendoza's smile widened slightly. Thank you, Chancellor. The United Earth Cooperative has been monitoring the Drexar situation closely. We believe we understand their pattern of attacks better than they realize. She activated her own display, showing a complex tactical analysis of Drexar movements. They're not random raiders, they're systematic hunters, moving in discernible patterns that our behavioral analysts have identified. The hologram transformed, showing predicted attack vectors and timelines with a precision that visibly impressed even the most ancient Council members. We propose Operation Guardian Shield, Mendoza continued. A small, specialized human force deployed to the 3 most likely next targets. Not a defensive perimeter, but a welcoming committee. You propose to fight them? Ambassador Trinlu Sa's middle body spoke alone, breaking their usual synchronization. A sign of distress in their species. The Council does not condone preemptive violence. Not preemptive, Mendoza corrected gently. Responsive, but with preparation. The Drexar respect only strength. We would simply demonstrate that the cost of attacking these colonies would be too high. With what technology? Creel scoffed. Your ships are generations behind Drexar battlecruisers. Mendoza's expression didn't change, but Zilvex noticed her junior diplomats exchange a quick glance. We have recently developed certain specialized countermeasures, she replied. We would only request council authorization to deploy, and perhaps some logistical support for transport. The operation itself would be entirely a human responsibility. High Chancellor Omnizur's luminescence pulsed thoughtfully. This is an unusual request, Ambassador. The Council typically acts as one body in military matters. Of course, Chancellor, consider it a gift, from humanity to our new allies, a chance to demonstrate our commitment to galactic peace. The debate continued for hours. Many council members were suspicious of human intentions or capabilities. Others were desperate enough to consider any solution. Zilvex remained troubled, unable to articulate his unease even to himself. There was something about the human's offer that reminded him of an ancient Corvassian fable about a predator that lured its prey by appearing helpless. As the council session ended with a narrow vote approving the human proposal, Zilvex watched Mendoza and her team leave, noting how differently they moved outside of formal proceedings, with a fluid efficiency of motion that seemed almost predatory. Ambassador Zilvex, Mendoza called, catching him by surprise. Would you care to join us for a human custom? We call it drinks after work, an informal social bonding ritual. Against his better judgment, Zilvex accepted. Perhaps closer observation would help him understand why, despite all their apparent friendliness, something deep in his ancestral instincts screamed danger whenever humans were near. The human vassal, Athena's shield, dropped out of FTL on the outskirts of the Kelbrax system, a modest mining colony with a population of approximately 40,000 mixed species, all council citizens. According to Ambassador Mendoza's prediction matrix, the Drexar would arrive within 36 hours. Captain Maya Suarez stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind her back, watching her crew work with quiet efficiency. The ship itself was unremarkable by council standards, a modified Jupiter-class cruiser that most advanced species would consider almost quaint, with its reliance on physical controls alongside neural interfaces. What wasn't standard, what the Council hadn't been fully briefed on, was the complement of 120 men and women aboard. Not regular United Earth Defense Forces, but members of the newly formed Xeno 3 Response Unit, XRU. Stealth systems functioning at optimal levels, Captain, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson. Local planetary defense networks don't see us. Suarez nodded. And our guests? The council observers are in their quarters. The Corvassian seems agitated. Suarez suppressed a smile. Ambassador Zilvex had been assigned as the council's primary observer for Operation Guardian Shield, along with representatives from the Rectarian Hive and the Vortigern technocracy. They expected to witness a technological solution, perhaps some clever new defense system. They weren't prepared for what humanity actually had planned. Status of deployment teams? Alpha through Delta teams are prepped and awaiting your order, Captain. All specialists have completed simulation runs with 97% efficiency ratings. Suarez finally allowed herself a small smile. Let's introduce ourselves to the locals. Minimal protocol, maximum efficiency. Within 3 hours, the XRU had established a hidden command center in an abandoned mining facility on Kelbrax's smaller moon. Planetary officials were notified only that a council security assessment was underway, with most of the population remaining unaware of any unusual activity. Commander Eli Reeves, leader of Alpha Team, finished briefing his 12 operators. Unlike standard military uniforms, they wore adaptable combat suits in matte black with minimal insignia, designed for both stealth and maximum mobility across varied environments. Each operator carried what looked like deceptively simple weaponry, nothing like the energy cannons or quantum disruptors common among advanced council forces. Questions? Reeves asked, looking at his team. Sir, Specialist Zhang raised her hand. Rules of engagement? Preserve civilian life at all costs. As for the Drexar... Reeves paused, his expression hardening. full tactical autonomy once they breach atmosphere. We're here to send a message, not just defend a single colony. The Council observers watched this briefing from behind a one-way quantum field. Ambassador Zilvex's discomfort had only grown over the past day. "These aren't diplomats or engineers," he whispered to his fellow observers. "These are hunters." Gatal of the Ruptarian hive fluttered her energy wings in dismissal. "They're primitive. Their weapons require physical projectiles or basic energy cells. The Drexar will cut through them like stellar wind through nebula dust." "I'm not so certain," replied Ambassador Creel, his optical sensors narrowing. "There's something methodical about how they're deploying, almost like they've done this many times before." They fell silent as Captain Suarez entered their observation room. The human female stood only 1.7 meters tall, small by Corvassian standards, yet her presence seemed to fill the space in a way Zilvex couldn't rationalize. "Distinguished observers," she greeted them with the typical human tooth display. "I hope your accommodations are satisfactory." "Captain Suarez," Zilvex gathered his courage, "your operation seems to be deploying warriors, not defensive systems. The Council authorized technological countermeasures, not direct combat." Suarez's expression remained pleasant, but something flickered in her eyes. "Ambassador, humans are the technological countermeasure. Our adaptability is our technology. Our ability to analyze, predict, and neutralize threats is unmatched in certain specific contexts. But your people have no experience with Drexar weapons or tactics," Gital objected. "We have extensive simulations based on Council records of previous attacks," Suarez replied. "But more importantly, we understand predatory behavior at a fundamental level." Her smile faded slightly. "You might say it's an area of expertise for our species." Before the conversation could continue, alarms sounded throughout the facility. Lieutenant Commander Jackson's voice came through the communications system. "Captain, we have incoming. 3 Drexar battlecruisers just dropped out of FTL. They'll reach Kelbrack's atmosphere in approximately 42 minutes. "That's sooner than your ambassador predicted," Creel noted, a hint of satisfaction in his mechanical voice. "Actually," Suarez checked her datapad, "they're right on schedule according to our secondary projection model. The Drexar have accelerated their attack timeline after each successful raid." Her eyes met Zilvex's multifaceted gaze. "They're growing more confident. Predators always do when they don't encounter adequate resistance." She turned to leave, then paused at the doorway. "Ambassadors, I recommend you pay close attention to what happens next. You may find it educational." As the door closed behind her, Zilvex felt a cold sensation ripple through his exoskeleton. "Did anyone else notice," he said quietly, "how her pupils dilated when she mentioned the Drexar arrival? Almost as if..." "As if what?" demanded. "As if she was excited by the prospect of the coming conflict." On the command deck, Captain Suarez enabled the direct neural interface with her deployed teams. Unlike the diplomatic smiles and carefully modulated voices of human representatives to the Council, her expression now held something ancient and focused, a look that would have been recognized by human ancestors who hunted on the plains of Africa thousands of years ago. "All teams, this is actual," she transmitted. "Time to hunt." The Drexar attack began precisely as the human analyst had predicted. 3 battlecruisers moved into low orbit around Kelbrax, deploying smaller assault craft toward the primary mining operations and population centers. The reptilian raiders followed their standard protocol: disable communications, destroy defensive emplacements, then begin systematic extraction of resources and any captives that might have value as slaves or experimental subjects. What they didn't expect was the complete absence of panic. "Clutch leader, this is strange," transmitted a Drexar scout as his assault craft approached the main colonial hub. "No evacuation attempts, no distress signals. Population appears to be continuing normal activities." Commander Vorthak, veteran of 17 successful raids on Council worlds, felt an unfamiliar sensation along his scaled spine. In a species that had evolved as ambush predators, The feeling had a name that translated roughly as hunting ground wrong. Maintain approach, he ordered, but heighten scan parameters. This could be a trap. By Council forces? His second-in-command scoffed. They've never managed to predict our movements before. Something is different, Vorthak insisted. Deploy in combat formation. 30 assault craft broke atmosphere, their gravity drives howling as they descended toward the colonial settlement. The first craft to land deployed a squad of Drexar warriors, their armored exoskeletons bristling with advanced weaponry. They moved toward the nearest structure, a water reclamation facility. Expecting resistance from local security forces at minimum, they encountered nothing. Building secured, reported Squad Leader Kraz. Moving to secondary objective. Across the colony, the pattern repeated itself. Critical infrastructure stood undefended. Civilian populations remained in their habitation units. Colonial security forces were nowhere to be seen. Commander Vorthok's unease grew. Establish perimeter and begin resource extraction, he ordered. Remain in combat readiness. The first true indication that something was wrong came 15 minutes into the operation. Squad Leader Kraz's vital signs flatlined without warning. Then another warrior's signal disappeared. Then 3 more in rapid succession. Clutch Leader, came an urgent transmission from another squad. We are under attack but cannot locate the enemy. They appear to be using some kind of... The transmission cut off. Vorthak snarled orders to regroup and establish defensive positions. The Drexar were experienced raiders, accustomed to overwhelming colonial defenses with superior technology and vicious efficiency. But now, his warriors were being systematically eliminated by an enemy they couldn't see. Thermal, quantum, and radiation scans showing nothing, Commander, his technology officer reported, a note of fear evident in his usually flat voice. How are they masking their signatures? They aren't, Vorthak realized with growing horror. They're not using energy weapons or powered armor. A memory surfaced from his military training, ancient warnings about primitive hunting species who had evolved to stalk prey without technology. Such methods had been considered obsolete for millennia, yet now, all forces switched to biological detection patterns, he ordered. Look for basic heat signatures and movement, but it was too late. The carefully orchestrated Drexar assault had deteriorated into chaos. Reports flooded in of warriors being eliminated by projectiles that penetrated their energy shields, calibrated to stop energy weapons, but not the crude kinetic force of human ballistic technology. Others reported being ambushed by beings who moved like shadows, employing techniques that seemed primitive yet devastatingly effective against forces trained to counter technological threats. From their observation post, the Council representatives watched in stunned silence. The holographic tactical display showed Drexar life signs winking out one after another, while the human operators moved with coordinated precision, adapting their tactics in real time. This is impossible, Gita whispered, her energy wings flickering with agitation. The humans are using projectile weapons and minimal shielding technology. They should be outmatched completely. They're not fighting like soldiers, Zilvex observed, unable to tear his compound eyes from the display. They're fighting like predators. Look at their movement patterns. The tactical display showed human operators separating Drexar units from the main group, isolating them, then converging for coordinated elimination. They used the environment, created distractions, employed psychological warfare tactics that the Drexar, unused to being the hunted rather than the hunters, were completely unprepared for. Captain Suarez, Ambassador Creel's mechanical voice betrayed his unease. Your forces are not merely defending the colony. They appear to be enjoying the elimination of the enemy. Suarez, who had been quietly observing both the battle and the ambassador's reactions, turned to them with an expression that no longer attempted to mask the predatory intensity beneath. You've misunderstood something fundamental about humans, Ambassador, she said calmly. We didn't develop our technologies to overcome our natural limitations. We developed them to extend our natural advantages. On the main display, Commander Vorthok's flagship attempted to retreat from the planet's atmosphere. Before it could reach escape velocity, the screen showed a small human craft intercept it. Within minutes, the Drakesar commander's life sign disappeared as well. "Operation complete," Lieutenant Commander Jackson announced. "All primary Drakesar forces neutralized. Casualty report: 3 human operators wounded, none critically. Civilian casualties, 0. The silence that followed was profound. "Captain," Zilvex finally spoke, his voice trembling slightly, "what happens now?" "Now?" Suarez checked her datapad as casualty and capture statistics continued to update. "Now we analyze the intelligence gathered from the Drexar vessels and captives. We'll have the location of their main fleet within hours. After that, Ambassador Mendoza will present the Council with Phase 2 of our proposal." "Which is?" Suarez's smile returned, but it no longer seemed like the diplomatic gesture the Council had grown accustomed to. It looked exactly like what it evolutionarily was, a predator baring its teeth. A more permanent solution to the Drakesar problem. The emergency session of the Grand Galactic Council convened 12 hours after the Kelbrax operation. The chamber buzzed with agitated communications as representatives from all 17 Council species discussed the human intervention and the disturbing footage that had been transmitted throughout Council space. Ambassador Helena Mendoza stood calmly at the center of the storm, flanked by her aides Daniels and Rodriguez. Unlike the previous session, many Council members now avoided direct eye contact with the human delegation. "Order!" High Chancellor Omnixor's resonant voice finally cut through the chaos. "This emergency session will now address the outcomes and implications of Operation Guardian Shield." The luminescent being's glow pulsed with what appeared to be agitation. "Ambassador Mendoza, the Council acknowledges that your forces successfully defended the Kelbrax colony with minimal casualties. However, many representatives have expressed concerns about the methods employed." Mendoza nodded respectfully. "Chancellor, methods must be judged by their effectiveness and precision. The Draxar threat to Kelbrax was neutralized with 0 civilian casualties and minimal infrastructure damage. By any objective measure, this was an unqualified success. The concern," Ambassador Trenlusaw's 3 bodies spoke in perfect synchronization, indicating their extreme distress, "is not about effectiveness, but about the nature of the intervention itself. The Council authorized defensive countermeasures. What we witnessed was a hunt," Zilvex finished, his normally melodious voice flat. "We witnessed humans hunting the Drexar with what appeared to be considerable satisfaction." Mendoza's expression remained pleasant, but a subtle change came over her posture. A straightening of the spine, a slight forward tilt of the head that many Council members found inexplicably threatening despite its subtlety. "Ambassador Zilvex," she replied, "you've touched on an important cultural difference that perhaps we should have better communicated. Humans do indeed take satisfaction in successfully neutralizing threats, particularly threats to innocent lives. This is an evolutionary adaptation that has served our species well. You speak of it clinically." Jatol fluttered her wings in agitation. "But the recordings show your warriors smiling as they eliminated Drexar combatants. One was even heard to say, like shooting fish in a barrel, a phrase our translators identify as indicating an activity of minimal challenge but maximum pleasure." For the first time, Mendoza allowed the diplomatic mask to slip slightly. "The Council has misunderstood humanity's place in the universal order. You look at our comparatively short developmental history, our reliance on seemingly primitive technologies, and you categorize us as non-threatening. This is an error." She activated the holographic display, but instead of tactical readouts, it showed Earth's natural history, specifically predator-prey relationships across multiple ecosystems and evolutionary timelines. "Humans are apex predators," she continued, her voice taking on a quality that made several Council members shift uncomfortably. "We evolved to hunt not through overwhelming physical advantages, but through cooperation, tool use, pattern recognition, and perhaps most importantly, through persistent pursuit. When our ancestors hunted large prey, they didn't rely on speed or strength. They relied on endurance. Following the target until it collapsed from exhaustion, the display shifted to show early human hunting parties tracking large mammals across African savannas. Your species, Mendoza gestured to the council at large, largely evolved either as prey animals developing defensive capabilities or as ambush predators relying on overwhelming force in short engagements. Humans evolved to identify patterns, to cooperate in complex hunting strategies, and to enjoy, yes, enjoy, the successful conclusion of a hunt. You're saying, Zilvex's voice faltered, that what we witnessed at Kelbrax was humans in their natural state, Mendoza completed the thought, protecting their extended social group, which now includes council citizens, by hunting a threat to extinction if necessary. A horrified murmur swept through the chamber. To extinction? High Chancellor Omnijour's luminescence dimmed with concern. Ambassador, the council cannot condone genocide even against the Drakesar collective. Mendoza raised a placating hand. Forgive me, Chancellor, poor word choice on my part. Not literal extinction, but neutralization as an organized threat. Which brings me to Phase 2 of our proposal. She activated a new holographic display showing the location of the main Drakesar fleet, gathered in a remote system beyond Council space. Captain Suarez had extracted this intelligence from captured Drakesar commanders. The United Earth Cooperative proposes a joint operation. 4 human tactical vessels, supported by Council logistical ships, will engage the Drakesar main fleet. Our analysis indicates we can neutralize their offensive capabilities with minimal casualties on both sides. 4 vessels against the entire Drakesar fleet? Ambassador Creel's metallic appendages clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme agitation in Vortigern body language. Even with your hunting prowess, that seems impossible. Mendoza smiled. Numbers can be deceiving, Ambassador. The Drakesar rely on technological superiority and fear. Remove those advantages, and they become remarkably vulnerable. And if the Council refuses this proposal? Zalvex asked quietly. Something cold flickered behind Mendoza's eyes. Then humanity will respect the Council's decision, of course. However, we would be forced to establish our own defensive perimeter around human-controlled systems. Unfortunately, this would necessitate a significant shift in resources away from our contributions to Council technological and cultural exchange programs. The implied threat wasn't subtle. In the short time humans had joined the Council, they had already contributed several breakthrough innovations in quantum mathematics, xenobiology, and cultural adaptation methodologies. The message was clear: accept our help on our terms, or we focus solely on our own interests. The Council will recess for deliberation, High Chancellor Omnizur announced, clearly disturbed by the direction of the discussion. As the Council members filed out, Ambassador Zilvex found himself face to face with Mendoza in a momentarily empty corridor. You planned this from the beginning? He said quietly. From the moment humanity joined the Council, Mendoza's smile remained in place, but her eyes held something ancient and unflinching. We planned to be valuable allies from the beginning, Ambassador. The Drakesar simply presented an opportunity to demonstrate our value more explicitly than we had intended at this stage. You're not what you presented yourselves to be, Zilvex continued, unable to stop himself despite the fear coursing through his system. All the talk of peaceful cooperation, cultural exchange, is absolutely genuine, Mendoza interrupted, her voice softening. Humans are complex, Ambassador. We are nurturers and creators and philosophers. We build, we heal, we explore. But never forget, her voice dropped to almost a whisper, we also hunt. It's written in our DNA. In the forward-facing eyes that evolved to track prey, in the endurance-optimized bodies that can pursue for days without rest, in the brains that derive satisfaction from successful pursuit and capture. She placed a hand on his arm, a gesture that made him flinch involuntarily. The good news, Ambassador, is that we're extremely cooperative apex predators. Once we consider another species part of our extended social group, our protective instincts extend to them completely. The Council worlds are now under that protection, whether they want to be or not, Zilvex observed. Mendoza's smile widened just enough to show teeth. Precisely. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to prepare for the Council's decision. Either way, the galaxy changed today. Better everyone understands what humanity truly is, don't you think? As she walked away, Ambassador Zilvex stood frozen, suddenly understanding what had truly happened. The Drakesar, for all their ferocity, had simply been a demonstration. The real message had been delivered to the Council itself. Humanity had joined galactic society, not as another collaborative species seeking harmony, but as apex predators establishing their territory and determining who would be under their protection, and by extension, under their influence. The diplomatic language, the cultural exchanges, the seemingly humble technological offerings, all of it had been the elaborate camouflage of an ambush predator, positioning itself at exactly the right moment to strike. And now, having revealed their true nature, humans had ensured that every species in the Council would reevaluate their place in the galactic order. Because today was indeed the day the galaxy realized that humans were just apex predators pretending to be diplomats. And somehow, that made them the most dangerous species of all. One cycle later, Zilvex stood at the viewport of the Galactic Council's newly established Joint Defense Command Center. The vast installation orbited Earth's moon, a location that many council members had privately objected to before ultimately conceding to human insistence on proximity to decision-makers. The Drakesar threat had been neutralized exactly as Ambassador Mendoza had predicted. The operation, which human military leaders had casually dubbed pest control, had been completed with surgical precision. The Drakesar leadership had been captured, their fleet disabled or destroyed, their subject populations liberated. Most disturbing to many Council observers was how the human forces had adapted to Drakesar countermeasures in real time, displaying an almost gleeful creativity in overcoming obstacles. What followed had been even more unsettling. A rapid reorganization of Council defense protocols with humans taking central roles in planning and execution. All framed, of course, as sharing expertise and mutual benefit. No direct demands had been made, no overt power plays executed. Instead, humanity had simply positioned its advisors at key junction points throughout the Council's infrastructure, their suggestions carrying the unspoken weight of demonstrated capability. Magnificent view, isn't it? Ambassador Mendoza's voice interrupted his thoughts. She joined him at the viewport, resplendent in the newly designed uniform of the Joint Command, a perfect blend of Council aesthetic traditions and subtle human military styling. Earth does have a certain beauty, Zilvex acknowledged, though I find myself wondering what other secrets it holds. Mendoza smiled, that same expression that had once seemed merely alien but now carried layers of meaning Zilvex was still learning to interpret. Was it diplomatic? Predatory? Perhaps both simultaneously? No real secrets, Ambassador, just perspectives not yet shared. She gestured to the stars beyond. The Council has existed for millennia, largely unchanged in its approach to galactic affairs. Stability has its advantages, but also its blind spots. Blind spots that humanity is eager to illuminate? Precisely. She turned to face him fully. Your species evolved in subterranean cavern systems, correct? Developing echolocation and vibration sensitivity as primary senses? Zelvi fluttered his sensory membranes in affirmation for approximately 3 million years before we reached the surface. So, you understand evolutionary adaptation to environment. Your ancestors developed incredible sensory precision because their environment demanded it, just as mine developed pattern recognition, social cooperation, and hunting instincts because our environment demanded those. She gestured to a passing group of Council representatives engaged in animated discussion with human advisors. The galaxy has been stable for too long, comfortable. The Drakesar were merely a symptom of deeper instabilities on the horizon. Species like yours evolved to detect minute changes in your immediate surroundings, but humanity evolved to track, predict, and intercept moving targets across vast distances. You're saying humans saw threats the Council was blind to. I'm saying we see patterns differently. Mendoza's expression softened slightly. The Council feared the Drexar because they were overtly aggressive. You should have been far more concerned about us. The candid admission hung in the air between them. Are you threatening the Council, Ambassador? Zilvex asked quietly. Mendoza laughed, a sound that still triggered contradictory responses in Zilvex's threat assessment instincts. Quite the opposite. I'm explaining why humanity's integration into the Council power structure is the best possible outcome for all species involved. She turned back to the viewport, her reflection superimposed over the Earth below. Predators are necessary in any healthy ecosystem, Ambassador. They cull the weak, prevent overpopulation, maintain balance. But apex predators also have a unique trait. They regulate the entire system. By fear? Zilvex couldn't keep the edge from his voice. By consequence, Mendoza corrected. Actions that threaten the system now have consequences that they didn't before. The Drexar learned this. Others will too. A notification chimed softly, and Mendoza checked her communication device. The Joint Defense Council is convening, shall we? As they walked through the corridors of the massive station, Zilvex observed the subtle changes already manifesting throughout Council operations. Human methodologies were being integrated everywhere, in security protocols, in communication systems, in strategic planning, not imposed but adopted almost unconsciously as their effectiveness became apparent. You know, Mendoza said conversationally as they approached the council chambers, early in human history, many prey species actually evolved to depend on our hunting behaviors. We removed competing predators, cleared migration routes, created stable territories. Eventually, some species began to follow human hunting groups voluntarily. The benefits outweighed the risks. Are you suggesting the council is being domesticated, Ambassador? Zilvex couldn't keep the alarm from his voice. Mendoza's smile widened. I'm suggesting a symbiosis, Ambassador. The Council provides structure, tradition, diverse perspectives. Humanity provides selective pressure in the right places. She paused before the chamber doors. After all, isn't that why your Prime Director secretly approached Earth about Council membership 2 cycles before our official invitation? Your predictive models showed the coming instabilities as well. Zilvex froze. That information was highly classified, known only to the highest levels of Corvassian leadership. How did you... Pattern recognition, Ambassador. Mendoza's eyes gleamed with something ancient and knowing. Your species may have invited the apex predator into your midst, but you did so because deep down you recognized what was coming. Sometimes the ecosystem needs a wolf to survive. The doors slid open to reveal the assembled representatives of the Joint Defense Council, a body that hadn't existed before humanity joined the galactic community, but now stood as its primary security apparatus. After you, Ambassador, Mendoza gestured politely, her diplomat smile firmly in place once more. We have so much work to do together. Zilvex moved forward automatically, suddenly understanding with perfect clarity. The day the galaxy realized that humans were apex predators pretending to be diplomats wasn't the end of something. It was the beginning.